So let's talk about some of the scariest armies on the tabletop for the Sons of Fenris. We'll look at what good players are using to try and get the most out of the Space Wolves. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Space Wolves. And in this video I thought we'd take a look over a whole bunch of armies to see how people are interpreting the new Codex and what sort of army lists seem to be having the most success so far. Space Wolves had their Codex come out a fair time ago at this point in their army set, but in terms of people playing games at competition level with them, that's only really started happening in earnest kind of recently. First up, we had to wait for the Codex to release on its own, and then after that for Games Workshop to issue the digital points cost. Then most of the events the weekend after weren't using those because it was too close to the cutoff, so it's only really been the last 2 weekends where people have been putting competitive Space Wolf lists on the tables at big tournaments. So far for initial impressions of strength, they're looking really quite well balanced. Win rates of around about 50% from the first 2 weeks from Meta Monday and StatCheck. And going by fairly recent new Codex data, that still seems to be the same for more casual play as well, around 48% from Goonhammer's 40k Stats Center. That one also has quite a lot more data. So far it doesn't look like anyone's actually won any events outright. I didn't stumble across any undefeated placings either, though I'd guess that's probably down to bad luck and partly due to chance. They clearly have a good win percentage and there's lots and lots of people that managed to have gone 4-1 with them, any of which could have easily taken things one place further. I'm sure we'll get some Space Wolf tournament victories before long. I was certainly really curious to see what people would choose to put on the table for Space Wolves. As initial impressions from the Codex, it did seem like the Saga of the Beastslayer looked like the really good one. Lots of powerful sources of strength both in the core rule and the stratagems in that detachment. And it does seem that one has been borne out. That does look like the one that if people are using a unique Space Wolf detachment, it tends to be that. Though otherwise for fighting melee Space Marines, both the Gladius Task Force and the Stormlance Task Force are both doing well for them. Space Wolves have got some good form with the Stormlance given their Thunderwolf cavalry. For this one I thought we'd take a look at a bunch of lists that either place form 1 or better at a big tournament, and one that's been taken to the WTC. There's definitely some common themes for units that are getting commonly played, and some that really aren't. As ever, if you were looking to pick up some Space Wolf units for your army as well, be sure to check out the channel's affiliate discount links down in the video description to save a bit of money versus Games Workshop. It does help to support Auspex Tactics too. In any case, let's jump into it though, and because it's the exciting Codex themed one, let's start with the Saga of the Beastslayer list. This is what the detachment provides you. The core rule gives you lethal hits against character, monster and vehicle datasheets, both at range and in melee, which as just a base damage buff is just enormously powerful. I think just about any faction in the game would really enjoy that. It helps small arms and medium strength firepower and melee weapons really punch up against tough stuff well, and maybe isn't a particularly bad thing to have going on while there's Knights and Death Guard about. As a bonus, you go up to lethal hits against everything if you manage to slay over half or more of the enemy's units with the character, monster or vehicle keywords. I guess nice enough if you trigger it, though if you do I guess it's going quite well already, and those units will generally be the ones that is most important to have lethal hits against. Otherwise they've got a reactive move of d6 inches, boosted to a 6 if it's Space Wolf Infantry or Thunderwolves, always great to have that and a real source of strength. There's a surge move one for Wulfen and Bloodclaws, so you can't be too close to them and guarantee that you're staying out of melee, not if you want to shoot them anyway. There's a return to reserves of Space Wolf units within 9 inches of a board edge, again really handy, and a common source of strength for detachments, a +1 to wound in the fight phase, so a nice simple damage dealer. Thunderwolves with the ability to smash through terrain pieces that are less than 4 inches in height. They can also jump over enemy screens as well, and then a -2 to move and charge for a character, monster or vehicle unit. Occasionally could be a big deal to keep things out of the fight, though maybe a little bit more on the niche side than some. For the enhancements, there's a really standout one for a character to join the Wulfen and gain a 2-inch move. That's really common to have on the Wolfguard Battle Leader, and that's a really common staple here. The other ones are also useful enough potentially as points fillers. Getting into the list though, and first up we have Forest Phantom's list that went 7-1 at Games Workshop's Tacoma Open GT, the big 460 player one, so a pretty massive record there. Here we've got a good cast of named characters. These 4 are all the ones that seem to be most commonly included in competitive armies. Ayak Rockfist, who's a big damage beatstick leading a squad of Wolfguard Terminators it would seem. And then we've got Logan Grimnar. I'd guess he probably wouldn't lead the Wolfguard Terminators, but instead would allow Ayak and his units to perhaps deep strike turn 1 if they wanted to. Otherwise he could personally deep strike turn 1, and he has that big aura of increasing the cost of stratagems, which could be super disruptive if he's able to stay alive there. Then there's Ragnar Blackmane, who's leading a big squad of Bloodclaws. They've got slightly mid-ish strength, but in the Saga of the Beastslayer they can really punch up, potentially with lethal hits and +1 to wound on top of Ragnar's buffs. Then we've got Bjorn the Fell-Handed, really quite a solid character dreadnought. He's hard to kill with his durability rules, and he generates U command points to plug into those really powerful stratagems. And finally for the HQs, there's the common Space Marine scoring staple of the Skirmishing Combi Lieutenant, who's hard to catch up with. Otherwise for this one, as well as Ragnar's unit and Ajax, there's a huge amount of scary looking Thunderwolf cavalry, 2 massive units of 6 of them that will hit really hard for the points cost, and 1 smaller unit of 3. The potential to jump around terrain could be handy enough for those, as could reactive moves, and they really like the lethal hits and the potential for a +1 to wound if they need it to. Then there's 2 Mighty Vindicators for some heavy hitting fire support that can crack some tanks, really quite common staples for the Space Marines if you want ranged damage dealers, and a bunch of skirmish and scoring units, 1 squad of intercessors with their sticky objectives, 2 squads of Fenrisian Wolves, potentially good trading things if they can be somewhat near to a character, and similar for the Wulfen that move fast and hit fairly hard, and should be nice enough as a punchy trading unit against enemy infantry. There's a whole load of big scary melee damage threats that you just can't really ignore in this list. 4 absolutely enormous melee threats, another 3 or 4 more medium-sized ones, plus the Vindicators. For unit focuses, the Thunderwolf Cavalry are one of the most common staples for the Space Wolves. They're 100 points for 3 of them, or 220 for 6. And overall they just have very nice stats all around. Good movement at 12 inches, great defense at toughness 6 with 4 wounds and a 4+ invulnerable save. That's really not too bad for 33 points. And then hit fairly hard in melee as well. 7 attacks per the unit, with the Riders ones going all the way up to AP2 damage 3 on the charge. If they can be getting lethal hits on their targets and maybe the +1 to wound as well, then the vast majority of units in the game really have to fear a charge from these guys, whether it's the lightest infantry where they've got enough volume attacks to get rid of them, Terminator equivalent with a damage 3, all the way up to big stuff with the lethal hits +1 to wound, and again damage 3 to really make you feel any hits that go through. Before we move on to the other Beastslayer list, I'll just give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor in Tabletop Stronghold. They're one option for some easy to store and transport magnetic carry cases, all made by Sam based in West Virginia in the USA. Magnetic storage has slowly been becoming more dominant as a way to store 40k miniatures over the past few years. The idea being to put magnets on the bottom of your bases and line them up on metal sheets, so you can store a vast amount of models all in one very tight space without the need for insulating foam or anything like that. Tabletop Stronghold have some purpose-built ones of these. Their mag case version is made of a very sturdy MDF box, really quite noticeably hard to break or damage, and then they have some steel sheets that slot in at different levels in the case. They can be raised higher or lower depending on the size of the miniatures transporters. Then on the front there's a clear acrylic sheet, so you can see which miniatures are where, both while they're on display at home and when they're being transported A to B. In general, I've seen a lot of positive feedback about these guys. Most people who've used these tend to be pretty happy with them. As well as the cases, they also have a competitive terrain set as well made of the MDF. That's a bit cheaper if you do happen to pick up a case. It might be of interest if you were in the market for some. But in any case, a big thank you to them for sponsoring the video. You can find them linked down in the video description. They do have a sale on at the moment for 25% off their normal prices. I'll also cycle back to them at the end of the video briefly if you're interested. I'll talk through a few of their models. Let's get back to the Space Wolves though, and for our second Beastslayer list, this one's by a Tristan Whitehead, who used this to go 4-1 at the Phoenix 40k 2-day GT. This one does have a few similarities with the previous one. We've got those 4 special characters again, Arjak, Logan, Ragnar and Bjorn. Looks like there's 2 Terminator squads in this one though. I guess potentially 1 for Arjak and 1 for Logan. Looks like Ragnar's with the Blood Claws once again, and there's also a bonus unit of Blood Claws as well, so you've got a second squad to swamp a second objective. Lots of OC there, and I guess they'll be a bit better at punching up in this detachment, plus having the nice surge move option. And then for on-foot characters, we've got a Wolfguard Battle Leader with Power Weapon and Shield with the Wolf Touched enhancement. Looks like he's going with one of the Wulfen with Storm Shield units. I guess the one with the Stormfrag auto launchers, given that he gives them the rerolls. So far I've seen more people using the Wolfguard Battle Leaders for that enhancement versus the Wolf Priest. I guess for a command point you can access +1 to wound if you desperately need it. Otherwise this one isn't quite so heavy on the Thunderwolves. There's 2 units of 3 of them. There's 1 extra Wulfen unit with Storm Shields. That one does take the totems. And then for objective support Space Marines, there's 1 standard unit of Intercessors, able to put their sticky objectives down on a point, and this time there's 2 units of 5 Infiltrators, interestingly enough. Going slightly heavy on them, I guess you'd be able to block out really quite a lot of deep striking reserves back into the home field. Probably the most unusual choice in the list though is Murderfang. I've not really seen too many people putting him on the table after the Codex updates. I guess he is fun and does punch pretty hard in melee. After losing his multiple fights trick though, I just don't really feel like he's worth the points premium. Still though, doesn't look like he's held back the list from doing pretty well here. Again, it's another one with a whole bunch of really quite big and scary threats. Next up, for some units to focus on, let's take a look at those Wolfguard Terminators, seeing as there were a couple of units there. These guys basically just feel like Terminators plus 1, 170 points, so a similar style to the regular Terminators, the most popular loadout being Power Weapon and Storm Shield, 4 attacks at Strength 5, AP 2 and Damage 2, then a Relic Great Axe on the Pack Leader for a few Damage 3 with Devastating Wounds, and potentially thinking about swapping one out for Power Fist and Assault Cannon, though lots choose not to. That gives you a Terminator unit that's fairly similarly fighty to regular Loyalist Terminators, particularly in this detachment with built-in lethal hits, and they also have rugged resilience as well, so -1 to wounds if the strength of the attack is greater than their toughness. In any case, it seems that they're strong enough to make the cut. It seems that leading these and a whole bunch of these ones is Ayak Rockfist. He's 95 points, and maybe I feel like I underestimated him a bit before. Looks like he is solid enough to make the cut, and does appear in the majority of these army lists, even if he doesn't have enormous squad buffing rules. He does allow Terminators fighting in death on a 4+, which isn't terrible, but I feel like just having some big punchy damage attacks with the anti-keywords and some rerolls built in isn't the worst thing in the world. He will be good against some of the targets that the rest of the Terminator squad will struggle against. Then finally for our Terminator characters, Logan Grimnar's a really popular choice as well. 110 points for the old wolf himself, though having a slightly eclectic combination of rules, being a fighty individual character with a bunch of damage 3 attacks, allowing 1 unit to arrive onto the board from reserve 1 turn early, and then also having a command point or a debuff, so that if the opponent spends command points too near him, then they have to pay more. Sometimes it's seen leading Wolfguard Terminators, though at least a fair few lists are using him just completely solo. Potentially if he sets up somewhere safe-ish in a mid-board ruin, the opponent's still going to struggle to deal with him, and that stratagem debuff could be really quite painful. He could drop himself from reserves a turn early, or do something else like a Wolfguard Terminator unit with Ayak. Certainly fun to see him on the board though, with such a cool miniature. Next up for a third take on the Saga of the Beastslayer, we've got this one by Mark Owen. This one went 4-1 at the Northeast Open. This one's a bit more of a shake-up on the formula compared with the characters of the last two. We've got Ayak and Ragnar in this one, again with a Terminator bodyguard and a Bloodclaw bodyguard. It looks like Ragnar's squad is up to a big 20 models in this one though. That's a whole load of volume attacks with those rerolls. Beyond that though, we've also got another great big unit of 20 Bloodclaws with Ulrich the Slayer in it would seem. 5 Blade Guard with a Judas here. They'll enjoy the lethal hits and the +1 to wound stratagem, and the Judas here will give them fights first too. And then we've got another wolf-touched Wolfguard Battle Leader. This time he's leading a big squad of 10 Wulfen with the Storm Shields and Storm Frags. Again, lots of brutal melee there. 5 big primary melee threats that your opponent can't ignore. And then on top of that, to do scoring and screening things, we've got 5 Fenrisian Wolves, 1 unit of Scouts for their infiltration and screening and return to reserve shenanigans, and this one also goes in for a bit of fire support as well. 1 Predator Annihilator with las cannons and 2 Predator Destructors. I'm sure prior to the Iron Priest nerf there would have been an Iron Priest with that Annihilator. For this one I feel like Ulrich the Slayer and the 20 strong Bloodclaws are maybe the most unusual choice. I've not seen too many people using Ulrich, but he certainly still seems intimidating with that many Bloodclaws, potentially with a +1 to wound against his favoured targets. Next up, for focus units, let's talk about the Wulfen and the Battle Leader. It certainly seems that in the Saga of the Beastslayer, it's a very easy choice to take 5 Wulfen or 10 Wulfen with Storm Shields with a Battle Leader to attach to them, and it does seem that people are considering the regular Wulfen with the Storm Shields as easily efficient enough to take. They're essentially 20 points each, get 2 attacks with those Wulfen Hammers, Strength 5, AP 2 and Damage 3 with the anti-keywords. Wounding vehicles and monsters on a 3+ is pretty brutal. And if they're with a character, they can take a whole bunch of those Stormfrag auto launchers for a bit of blast keyword volume fire, as they won't need the death totems to reroll hit rolls, as they'll already have that. It seems that people tend to go death totems if they don't have a leader attached though. They are really quite an efficient unit though. They move fast and the defense isn't absolutely horrible. They are toughness 6 even if they have a 4+ save. Maybe not awful for 20 points for a fast moving and destructive unit though, and they can even have some OC if there's a character nearby them, so a bit of double synergy with the character attachment with Wolf Touch there. It does seem that more people seem to be using the Wolfguard Battle Leader to attach to them rather than the Wolf Priest for the +1 to wound. I guess besides a few infantry and biker style targets, they'll be wounding things on a 3+ anyway, and they can always flex into a +1 to wound if they really want it for 1 CP. The Battle Leader does feel like the better choice for me. It's really quite punchy in its own right. Some seem to be using both of his melee weapons, usually combined with a Storm Shield, and giving them sustained hits 1 and re-rolling hit rolls of a 1 is a pretty massive combined buff. His unit is just going to be enormously destructive, never mind if you start giving them extra stratagems and things. Moving on from the Beastslayer detachment though, let's take a look at some lists using the more core Codex detachments. First up, a few using the Stormlance Task Force. This one's the one that's all very focused on mounted keyword things, though it does have two big things for just normal assault infantry anyway. Advance and charge, and fall back and charge from the detachment rule. Really great just to have that all the time, particularly with pretty high movement Space Wolf units already. It does get Armour of Contempt, which the Beastslayer doesn't, but otherwise it's also got a good reactive move as well. An automatic 6-inch reactive move is pretty great for backing away from charges or hiding behind terrain. Beyond that though, for Space Wolves, the Thunderwolves can really use the mounted stratagems too. There's ones for giving them lance or being -1 to hit and wound versus shooting. That's what make big blocks of Thunderwolf cavalry really hard to take down. And a 2 command point for an auto advance 9 inches for a mounted unit. So a casual 21 inches and charge for Thunderwolves. That's going to get them there if you can budget for that. For the first Stormlance one, this one's a WTC one, taken by Alex Bathopoulos on Team USA. Obviously Team Tactics have some other things going on, but at the same time the lists have loads of thought put into them and need to be absolutely honed and very, very scary. Their lists were submitted prior to the Iron Priest rules change, so the 2 Predators and the Iron Priest would probably now be subbed out for something else, I'd guess. It's still interesting to see the rest of the choices for Stormlance Space Wolves though. We've got Logan Grimnar and Ayak Rockfist, I guess each leading a squad of Wolfguard Terminators here, and they're going big on the Storm Shields. There's the Skirmishing Combi Weapon Lieutenant, and there's Bjorn the Fell-Handed with a Hellfrost Cannon, and then as you'd probably guess for the Stormlance, it's going extra big on the Thunderwolf Cavalry, 2 big units of 6 once again, and 1 unit of 3. They're really going to enjoy those long charges, and are going to be a massive pain to take down as well, particularly if you have to do so at range with the -1 to hit and wounds. Then there's a bunch of fairly normal Space Marine skirmish units, 1 squad of jump intercessors with their deep strike and fast movement for doing actions and skirmishing, 1 unit of infiltrators denying some deep strike or potentially flexing out to push into the midboard, 1 unit of scouts for infiltrate themselves, and then some intercessors with a power fist for their sticky objectives. Feels like quite a lot of overlap with the Saga of the Beastslayer list, though no Wulfen in this one with no character to go in the unit. Bjorn the Fell-Handed has certainly been a common staple over most of those last few though. He's 170 points, and it's really quite a sturdy dreadnought with a 5+ feel no pain, 8 wounds, and a -1 to wound with big hard-hitting anti-tank weapons. He's got a fair bit of melee damage, often takes a Hellfrost Cannon to back that up, and is way less slow than he used to be with a 9-inch move, a fair bit more likely to be able to get the jump on the enemy before he takes too much damage perhaps. Generating command points is a big bonus to any list though, and feels like both the Saga of the Beastslayer and the Stormlance are adequately command point hungry to really value him. For another take on the Stormlance, his list by Guillermo Martinez, who played with this list and went 4-1 at a 46-player tournament. Compared with the rest, quite a few differences here. It goes very light on the characters as opposed to very heavy. The only named character is Bjorn the Fell-Handed. And then there's a Wolfguard battle leader with Thunderhammer and Stormshield. Looks like he's probably leading that squad of Wolfguard Headtakers. Seems they're just trusting on the Stormlance advance and charge to get them where they need to go. They'll certainly mess up any targets they can contact when they get there. Then again, really unsurprisingly, this one goes very heavy on the Thunderwolf Cavalry. Great for the fast movement and stratagems. There's some intercessors for sticky objectives and an Invader ATV for a cheap trading unit, though interestingly enough this one takes a whole load of Wulfen, 3 units of 5 of them with the death totems. Feels like with few characters there's a good chance they're going to be OC0 in this one, so maybe just really focusing on jumping out and destroying enemy units with their good movement and advance and charge. Then this one goes very heavy on the Dreadnoughts as well. 3 Ballistas Dreadnoughts for nice general purpose firepower with baked-in rerolls, and then some pretty interesting and different choices on the others. 1 Brutalis with the Talons, and then a Venerable Dreadnought with shield and great axe. Again, maybe slightly surprised to see a Venerable Dreadnought here. I still say at 140 points they probably just don't have enough overall value between their movement, damage and defence. Though perhaps in Stormlance Task Force they might be here for the +1 aura to advance and charge. They can give that to friendly Space Wolf units, and that could be a 2-inch extra threat range to add to the already fast movement of Stormlance here, I suppose. I guess could be playing to a bit of a theme though. Really quite nice to see dread heavy Space Wolves, including Bjorn. We've got a big 6 Dreadnoughts on the board here. Wolfguard Headtakers perhaps seem to be in the sort of usable but not absolutely auto-include kind of spot for the Space Wolves right now. Their points can vary between 85 to 220 depending on the unit size and how many hunting wolves they're taking. In other lists I've certainly seen plenty of people taking an 85 point squad and then the very cheap unit of sacrificial wolves alongside, essentially getting you some nice cheap screens on the board for just 25 points there. Otherwise though, for their stat line, they're basically Blade Guard equivalents, 4 attacks at strength 5 and damage 2, moving a little bit faster, and then the choice of either extra attacks or 4+ invulnerable save from their Storm Shield. I do quite like the way they're such a flexible unit, and there's some genuinely good draw to both taking them with storm shields or on berserker mode with the paired mastercrafted weapons. They're going to be enormously dangerous to anything that they can hit, and the Wolves making a smaller squad a little bit more interesting doesn't hurt either. Finally, for a third take on a successful Stormlance list, there was this one by David Gaylard, who managed to go 4-1 with this at Darksphere July GT. Quite a lot of the supporting elements of this one seem quite similar to the others, going really big on the Thunderwolf cavalry with a big 15 of them on the table once again, great users of the Stormlance stratagems, and there's also Ragnar here with 10 Bloodclaws, a combi lieutenant, some intercessors and some scouts for some objective support and skirmishing, and some trusty standard Space Marine firepower with a ballistas dreadnought and 2 gladiator lancers for some dedicated anti-tank. Maybe not the worst idea in the world with so many knights stomping around. The unusual and terrifying thing about this one though is a great big unit of Wolfguard Terminators, no less than 10 of them with great axe and storm shields. Again, I'd probably guess that it's going to be Ayak Rockfist that goes in that one, and then Logan Grimnar goes it alone. Though could potentially allow them to arrive on the board turn 1, so you've just got a monumental damage and defensive threat arrive somewhere threatening right away. I guess potentially trying to hide from at least a little bit of firepower, then maybe could be an interesting one to pull the automatic 6 advance on. Maybe moving 12 inches then charging for quite that many Terminators sounds horrendous. Just about any stratagems or options could be great on those. They could get some good value out of Armour of Contempt and the 6-inch reactive move in particular. Certainly not sure how they were played, but interesting to see a big squad of 10 of them on the board. Most other people seem to prefer 5s of them. Talking about another staple of the Space Wolves though, Ragnar Blackmane and Bloodclaws just seem like a choice that's incredibly hard to go wrong with. For 90 points, Ragnar just has a whole load of value. His Frost Fang just buries the opponent under a whole bunch of quality damage 2 melee attacks. He gets a big 10 attacks at the charge at strength 6, AP 3 and damage 2 with sustained hits, so it's likely to be getting over 10 hits with that. And then people most commonly seem to pair him with Bloodclaws as opposed to the Wolfguard Headtakers, as with them he allows them to reroll wound rolls, but perhaps more importantly he allows him to reroll wound rolls as well, and with strength 6 melee attacks and that many of them, he is going to absolutely bury things. Certainly doesn't hurt to have any buffs from Saga with the Beastslayer on the go as well. Throw lethal hits or +1 to wound into that mix and things get even worse. The squad's got quite good threat range in the first place, the Bloodclaws being able to advance and charge innately. Bloodclaws do seem like quite a nice retinue for him. They're fairly cheap and effective Space Marines, basically Assault Intercessor style profiles, but without getting any rerolls at base and no fancy damage to power weapon. Due to not having too many other things though and being locked to a minimum squad of 10, it does mean they're very cheap though. 135 points, so 13 points per model basically, and they do move fast and can advance and charge. They can sweep onto a mid-board objective and basically guarantee that you're going to flip it due to having OC2. Finally, last but not least, we've got a Gladius Task Force list. Gladius Task Force being a Space Marine staple, of course. The core rules have the combat doctrines, advance and charge, fall back, shoot and charge, and advance and shoot. You can flex between them for 1 CP. They've got plenty of good support beyond that for melee armies, reactive moves, a lance melee with some extra AP in assault, and 2 command point fights on death doesn't hurt either. It does seem like a fair few lists have been choosing to go Gladius for the Space Wolves. I've just got the one here today. This one by a Hugo Paul Lamoureux, who went for 1 at a 28-player tournament. This one has a few staples, maybe the most notably different thing being a whole load of Wulfen, 2 great big units of 10 of them with death totems and storm shields, so 200-point units that are likely to be able to sweep enemy tanks and knights off the board. Having quite that much anti-vehicle 3+ with damage 3 is certainly going to be a big threat to a Titanic Knight. On top of that, there's Ayak Rockfist and Logan Grimnar, each of them looking like they're leading a Wolfguard Terminator unit with shields and the great axe on the Sergeant. Bjorn the Fell-Handed is here with his Hellfrost Cannon, handy for the stratagems and can make use of multiple doctrines. And then it seems that we've got a Wolf Priest with a bodyguard of 3 Wolfguard Headtakers. I'd guess that he's there for the 12-inch aura to put the Wulfen in range to counteract their Curse of the Wulfen. If he moves up behind the line slightly, then those Wulfen could still have the OC to take objectives after they've hopefully annihilated whatever was there. And then his own unit's a pretty good threat in its own right still to follow on after that. Then there's 3 efficient units of Thunderwolf Cavalry, kind of hard to go too far wrong with them for their sheer stats for 100 points. There's 1 unit of Scouts for their infiltrating and screening things, and then there's some Space Marine firepower, a Ballistas Dreadnought for some nice general purpose stuff, and then interestingly enough a Gladiator Lancer with an Iron Priest. It still feels like they'll be really quite effective together post-nerf. 3 shots rather than 2 with that devastating turret weapon is certainly going to make enemy tanks and knights think twice. Interesting to see the big use of the Storm Shield Wulfen with the Wolf Priest to help them out though. Those units look like they'd be absolutely monstrous damage, particularly if they decided to activate the extra AP stratagem potentially. In any case, there's a few examples of what Space Wolf army lists seem to be doing well right now. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Certainly looks like there's some real staples in the Codex, but at the same time there seem to be very few things that are truly auto-include. For the characters, it looks like no one unit appeared in every single one of these army lists. There's definitely some big staples though: Logan, Ayak, Bjorn and Ragnar. Thunderwolves, Wulfen and Terminators all seem to be doing really well, though certain other choices, perhaps slightly predictably, just don't seem to be seen. Not really too surprised not to see any Grey Hunters on the tabletop, and same for Njal Stormcaller. I look forward to hearing your takes on the list though, or any other insights as to how they play, down in the comments below. That's it for this one, though before I go I'll just cycle back to today's video sponsor in Tabletop Stronghold. If you did have any interest in hearing about their magnetic carry case range, for their cases, they basically have stacked layers of these trays. Maximally loaded, they can take around about 90 25mm infantry or 6 knight armigers or so. And then their cases have different sizes and heights. The mini one is the smallest one, around about £72 or $75. That includes shipping to most of the world, though might be exclusive of VAT or import duties. Even for the small one though, it's at least fairly chunky, enough room for a couple of great big tanks on the bottom layer as you can see. Otherwise, for the bigger variants, there's the regular mag case. This one's around about the £112 or $120 mark. More sort of army size though. You can see it's quite tall by the Chaos Knight that's hanging out on the ground floor here alongside his friends. And plenty of room for infantry in the top ones as well. I'll leave the dimensions of them on the screen, and they also come with a supply of magnets for basing too. There's also the really big one, potentially big enough to do some entire collections. This one with the acrylic front put on in the picture. As mentioned, they do have their terrain sets as well. These ones are discounted a little if you happen to pick up a mag case and include it in the order if you were in the market for some terrain. In any case though, a big thank you to them for sponsoring the video. You can check them out, links down in the video description if you'd like to. I'll leave that there for now though. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly keep the Warhammer 40k videos coming. I tend to have new ones coming out just about every day. If you've been enjoying the videos a lot and you'd like to help support and keep them coming, Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages: seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.